Hello, my name is Karina Chung, and today I'll be giving you a walkthrough of the SMRT-Flames tool that accompanies our paper, Managing Smoke Risk from Wildland Fires, Northern California, as a case study. On the left panel here, we can enter our inputs for our land management scenario. So first, we select the treatment zone for land management. In this case, we'll select Northern California. We can then select our receptor or region of interest for calculating the population-weighted smoke exposure. So here we'll do the Central Valley. We can then select the year that we want our simulation to correspond to. This year can range from 2003 to 2021. As we adjust the year, the meteorology automatically adjusts to the year that is closest based on average fire season vapor pressure deficit. In this case, I'll be showing you 2020. Then we can adjust the parameters to the smoke risk index. So this includes the average percentage of area burned for both savanna and temperate forest land cover types. We can also adjust the fuel consumption level from low to median to mean to high. And then finally, we can specify a targeted or variable land management scenario. A targeted land management scenario specifies two parameters. One is a number of grid cells n, and then the second is a land management intensity from 0 to 1. The targeted scenario would then perform land management of your specified intensity at the n grid cells that contribute most to population-weighted smoke exposure, as identified by our smoke risk index. You can find more information on how the risk index identifies these cells in the paper. The variable land management scenario, in contrast, allows you to specify land management intensities at whatever grid cells you choose, rather than just the top n. So you can enter longitude and latitude coordinates of the grid cells you're interested in, along with the land management intensities. In this case, I'll be showing you a targeted scenario with the top 15 grid cells and a land management intensity of 0.5. So we can submit these, and we'll run a simulation. Before the map loads, I'll preface by saying that on the right-hand side, these sliders just adjust the transparency of the colors that you're seeing on the map. So we can reduce the transparency, make them a bit more faded. We can also increase the transparency. These do not change the actual numbers calculated on the map. So here we can see our base scenario for both the smoke risk index as specified in our paper and the priority smoke risk targets, which are just the top 15 grid cells identified by our risk index. Now we can visualize the custom scenario according to this targeted land management scenario we entered earlier by checking custom scenario on both of these. This shows that the custom scenario does have different priority smoke risk targets. So it shows that our land management did have an effect. We can also visualize some other inputs to our smoke risk index on their own. So the first is the custom land management scenario that we just entered. So this shows the scenario we talked about earlier. We can also look at the recurrence factor for two different land cover types, savanna and temperate forest. This is a measure of how recent the last fire was. So here's for savanna and for temperate forest. We can also look at the land cover fractions of savanna and temperate forest in the grid cells throughout Northern California. So darker colors mean a higher concentration. And here's for temperate forest as well. And then finally, we can visualize the GeosChem adjoint sensitivity corresponding to the year that we're simulating, the meteorology year here. So this is the 2020 sensitivity. This shows the transport of smoke over our region of interest as governed by weather and wind patterns. Now we can visualize some additional data sets that were helpful in creating our tool. So the first is historical fire emissions data from GFED. This corresponds to 2020, since that's the year that we entered. We can also look at the calculated smoke exposure from 2020 using the historical data. Now we can see the vapor pressure deficit across our region in 2020, as well as the population density. And finally, the land cover types as specified by the National Land Cover Database. Lastly, if you scroll down on the left-hand side, you can see a variety of tables and visualizations that are helpful in interpreting some of our results. The key result here is the scenario comparison. This shows the comparison between the base land management scenario, which is no land management, and the custom scenario that we entered. So it shows the percentage of smoke exposure reduced by the land management, as well as the percentage of excess deaths reduced by the land management. Thank you so much. You can find the paper at this link, as well as the code. Have a good day.